We have plenty of time.
I have started the recording, so you guys are ready.
All right, so this is our interview with Commissioner Ritz for our final project. So, Commissioner, you joined the FAA in 1979 and then became director in 1997. What were you doing before you became a part of the FAA?
Well, I can go back to what I did before, and then I can tell you what I did from the time I got to FAA before I became the director. I graduated from OU in merchandising and marketing, and my husband was in the petroleum business. We got married and we moved to New Orleans, and I thought I for sure would go into marketing. And I started looking around. The business was not all that great, and I ended up kind of backing into a job with the Forest Service at the very bottom of the government. So I had a great perspective of what it looked like to be entry level. And I can't say that I had the most stellar position in the world, but it was a real learning experience to figure out how the government worked and what I needed to do to move up. Then John got transferred, and so I went to work for the Naval Air Station. And again, it was at pretty much
starting over from the bottom.
But this time there was an aviation influence, and I'd never paid that much attention to it, although I used to fly with my dad all the time, and I was always interested in aviation. I never thought I would pursue a job that way. Knew nothing about the Navy, so it was a real learning experience to figure out on the totem pole and enlisted and to an officer. So I spent, I guess, 3 years in Corpus Christi, and then we decided to move to Norman, Oklahoma. And I backed in again. I interviewed with other government agencies, Tinker and OPM, and FAA said, we'd like to hire you if we can get a waiver from the administrator. Well, that was a big deal, and I don't even think I appreciated at the time.
Especially in 1979.
What it would take to get, and again, I was not that far up on the food chain. They came through, hired me, and I went to work in HR in FAA. And so, as you said, that was in 79, and I spent, I think, some of the best times learning the FAA. Not only did I spend time working in all areas of HR for FAA, I then went into Candidate Development Program, which is where they develop their executives. And I went from HR to logistics. And logistics in Oklahoma City is for the entire country. That was a great learning experience. I was deputy at the logistics center, so understanding how the NAS comes together. Then I was asked to come to Aviation System Standards, and that is a different organization at the Aeronautical Center. And Airman Aircraft Registry was there, flight inspection, a lot of the aviation side of things. So I was deputy director there. And at this point, I felt like I had a puzzle piece. And FAA is a very exciting place, but it's very big and quite complex. So if you think about each time I worked in a certain area, that was like putting another piece in the puzzle. And I could see how all these different organizations supported each other. And that was huge because a lot of my peers went into one organization and stayed and never moved around. So once I was in Aviation System Standards, then I was asked and I competed to be the deputy at the Aeronautical Center, which was very exciting for me. And 3 years later, then I competed and I was named the director of the Aeronautical Center. So by the time I got to be at that level, and I had been in the Candidate Development Program, which meant I got to travel all over the country understanding the other aspects of FAA, I thought, I think I have the best job in the country, and I felt like I did.
And so it sounds like that through your career as an HR specialist, you just kind of were introduced to the world of aviation as a whole, but what made you decide in the end to pursue a career in aviation?
Well, again, I don't think I knowingly decided I would go into aviation. It was more when I went to Naval Air Station, that was the job that was available,
Mm-hmm.
was in HR, but I happened to be taking care of the Naval Air Station.
Oh, okay.
So when you have a lot of aviation people, and I was serving admirals and generals who were involved in aviation. Then when I came to Oklahoma, I competed for and I was interviewed for different jobs in different government agencies. It happened to be Federal Aviation
Okay.
Administration, which I thought was the best thing going.
Yeah.
So I started in HR within FAA,
Mhm.
but that was understanding all the different organizations and the different people that work for FAA. And so then when I got into the technical side with logistics and aviation system standards, and I started understanding the whole world of aviation.
And that just really sparked your interest, it sounds like. And
Absolutely.
now you're here. We're glad to have you here on our board.
Well,
in that
thanks.
position. It's great. We love it. Now, I know the Deregulation Act kind of occurred about a year before you ended up with the FAA, but did you happen to notice, how did that affect your job as an HR specialist and then going into that position at the FAA as a whole? Did it have any real influences or effects?
As an HR specialist, I don't know if I was that. I mean, obviously, I knew from just a consumer standpoint what deregulation meant, and as a flying passenger, what it meant as far as not having just a few airlines that controlled everything, that controlled the prices. So I appreciated that aspect. When I got to FAA, I was more focused on what does it take, because FAA, even though it was deregulated, FAA still was in charge of safety, and so from a regulatory standpoint, that's what we did. But I would say that as I moved up within FAA, you're constantly aware of what's the aviation business doing, how are we supporting the customers. Safety is paramount. And what's interesting is at one point, FAA always used to, in their mission, used to talk about air commerce and really earning money for that, helping to earn money for the different aviation companies and the airlines. They moved away from that, and safety was paramount. So they never wanted it to compromise, even when they're looking at the positions of seats on an airline. Airlines want more seats for more revenue. FAA backed away and said, wait a minute, we're not interested in that. We're interested in what's the safest ability to get out of the aircraft. So that's, to me, then FAA was always safety.
So FAA for you is mostly built on the safety. So
and then as a consumer, as a private consumer, I was very interested in what was going on in deregulation, and was it good for the customer, was it not?
It sounds like around that time, though, there were a lot of fare wars, so it seems like it could have been good for the customer at times, and at other times it really wasn't. And that really just kind of brings up the whole, I like how you brought up safety, because companies will sacrifice safety in the name of money, especially...
Some will.
Some will, but especially when you can kind of sneak in under the radar, and with aviation being as lucrative as it was at the time, for lack of a better term, for the more rich and powerful, they'll probably work to fit as much rich and powerful as they can in and sacrifice safety. So they really do need, even with that deregulation, somebody continuing to push safety.
Well, you have to, because you go back and you look at some of the large airlines that survived. Look at how they did it. They did not cut corners.
They didn't cut corners. They have high safety ratings.
There were a lot of mergers that took place, some more effective than others, and there were a lot of startups that had no intention of investing in a lot of safety related. I don't think they knowingly went out to compromise the customer, but their whole business model was not around trying to be the safest airline. It was more how you get more passengers.
Yeah, just get as much money as you can, as quick as you can. Now, I know you might not have been in necessarily a position of power, for lack of terms, but it sounds like you were applying to be deputy maybe around this time. But the double dip recession, how did that affect the FAA at all, if it did? Because you said FAA was mostly focused on safety, instead of commerce at that point, and the recession honestly would have affected airlines from a more commercial standpoint than necessarily a safety standpoint. Cutting corners, not being like we're in right now. We're having issues getting aircraft parts. Aircraft parts are extremely expensive right now to repair. So how did that affect the FAA and the way it managed the field of aviation?
Well, FAA reports to, and still does, Department of Transportation. Department of Transportation looks across the whole aspect. So they were on top of what's happening when you deregulate. Do you have airlines that are safe to fly? And are they being looked at even though they deregulated it? Are they going crazy? Do they need to be shut down? So FAA still needed to be paying attention to the safety issues, but then the backsplash of, we were always aware of what startups didn't make it, what startups kind of had horror stories in the way they were running their organizations. On the other hand, like you said, there were good times. It was much cheaper to fly, much more lucrative.
It was
more
great for
airlines.
consumers.
Yeah, so it's a balance, and that's why I don't think FAA's mission was ever questioned, because even in a deregulatory environment, you need safety and oversight more than ever.
And they continue to push that safety even with the recession and everything going on. So they were still just going right hard after safety aspects.
There's a fine line
between too much and then not enough.
Are you doing your maintenance when you're supposed to? That's why FAA has aviation safety inspectors. That's why a lot of airlines will be right close to the margins, and they're not going to do what it takes.
That makes sense. You want to toe the line but never cross it, is what it mostly sounds like. So when you were competing for director in 96 to become, no, not 96, in 96 to become director in 97, when you were competing for that, were you focused on the FAA vision at the time, or what you wanted to do with your time at the FAA as a director?
Well, the Aeronautical Center, a lot of people don't know, is and still is the largest DOT facility in the field outside of headquarters. At the time I was director, there was about 7,500 people, including contractors, so it was a large organization. So it was hard to say any one aspect. It was like running a city in a way, because 1,100 acres, over 100 buildings, a lot of people doing critical functions to support FAA. It probably was from the time I first came in 79 to when I took over, much more focused on cost effectiveness. Aeronautical Center was known for centralized support to not only all of FAA, but we used to do all the payroll for all of Department of Transportation. Then we were able to then start doing all the accounting for all of Department of Transportation. That's a lot of people. It does not take away from FAA, but when you think about it, you're supporting people in every part of Department of Transportation.
So it went from you being responsible from 7,500 people approximately just at the Aeronautical Center up in Oklahoma City to being in charge of basically making sure everyone in the Department of Transportation got what they needed to do and the support they needed to have to do their job.
In those areas. I mean, payroll, you learn right off the bat, the worst thing you can ever do is mess up somebody's pay. So from that standpoint, the folks that worked at the Aeronautical Center in that organization and worked for me were very focused on taking care of all Department of Transportation.
That makes sense. And so you were director until 2013, right? So you went through the Great Recession right after the housing market crash in 2007. Did that? I know you said that the double dip recession didn't necessarily affect the FAA as a whole because they maintained their focus on safety. Did the Great Recession affect it any differently, or was it more of the same thing when you were director?
Well, even when you go back and what was happening in 2008, it's still individuals. It's still individuals coming to work and doing a job, and the job was very important in FAA, but individuals were having issues because their spouse, mine included. Oil business was not at its best. So
Straight down.
So you have a lot of families that have lost jobs or are not doing well economically. As a director or as the executive, you've got to think about the people. You've got to think about the people doing the job for FAA. The mission didn't change for FAA, but it was important that we never took our eye off of how do we support our people to the best way possible. And again, I don't think that wasn't that people weren't focusing on the economy, but number one, there were many of them that were very happy to have government jobs, and because usually that's a lot more stable.
So for you, was there any real, I know you said you focused on the people during that period of time.
You always focus on the people.
Was there any pushback on you focusing more on the people rather than, for lack of a better term, the bottom line of the FAA's mission?
The way I see it, you have to focus on the people first if you want to get to the bottom line. If you're going to the bottom line and you don't have the people committed, you're not going to get there because they're not going to give it your best.
Yeah, they're not going to give their best, so you're not going to get their best, which means you're going to be putting out something.
So it's first things first. But one of the reasons I liked my job so much is in Oklahoma City, great workforce, and a lot of people had worked there forever. A lot of families worked there in different organizations, and there was a lot of pride at stake. And I just knew it was important to be a leader and show the direction and come up with what was important. And the bottom line, as you mentioned, is absolutely important. And how can you be most cost effective? But it's how do you get people to feel appreciated? How do you get people to realize they can be creative, they can come up with ideas as long as you clarify where we're all trying to go?
That makes sense, yeah. Because you have to support the people below the bottom line to actually reach it. The bottom line as we see it isn't the real bottom line. The real bottom line will be your people underneath that, helping hold that up, get you to that point across the finish line.
The people are, if they buy into what the mission is and what we're trying to accomplish, they're very creative. They can come up with better ideas than I would think of. And that's what you try and do, is create an environment that people take pride in what they do, that they feel like they can contribute and will be heard. And you know that you've got to continue to do cost-effective, creative ideas. That's what you want, is you want them buying into it.
Now we're going to go to a bit of a cliche question and then maybe something heavy or maybe the other way around.
Okay.
Let's go with 1979. That's not a great time to be a woman in the U.S. or really anywhere, much less in a government role pushing for that. I mean, an HR specialist was, for lack of a better term, expected of a woman, more of a feminine position back then, but being a director of a major aeronautical center, maybe not so much. So what did you face any challenges as a woman going through that?
Well, it was out there. And just the very fact you were saying when I came in HR, a lot of people would assume you stay right there and you don't think about competing to go into the candidate development program. There were very few women at the time that competed and were successful in getting into FAA's candidate development program. I made up my mind early on. FAA's still is male-dominated organization, highly technical. There's a lot of very, very successful and bright females that have made a huge, huge impact. I think if you look for problems, you're going to find them. I had great mentors. Every single one of them was a male. There were not too many females that were higher up, and they were very committed to seeing that I moved up and gave great feedback. It wasn't just a matter of, well, let's take her and move her up because she's a female. I think they were committed to, and FAA was committed to, I felt like, trying to develop the best executives they could, be it a male or a female.
And it's very clear, like your work spoke for itself.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll guarantee you, I felt like because I decided that, I felt like I needed to work harder because I didn't want people thinking, see, told you, she wasn't going to make it. Yeah, she's not going to make it.
Yep.
That's what I put on myself. It wasn't someone else saying, you've got to do that. But I look back and I realize very frequently, I was the only female in the room. You just get used to it. You
Yeah,
kind of
you
laugh
don't even
about
notice
it, and you're one of the guys, so to
Mhm.
speak. It's an environment, and I'll tell you, there'd be some environments I think I would not have wanted to be in, because it would not have been a feeling like
Mhm.
it's all about what you do. It would be, for various reasons, I don't think you can make it.
Yeah.
I never felt that way.
Makes sense.
So when I got to be the director, it was critical for me to look at a very diverse organization and making sure that people felt like they could contribute no matter where they came from, what they did, and it really made a difference.
I just have two more questions.
Sure,
for
I'm
you.
good. I'm good.
The first one's going to be, you were director in 2001 during the 9/11 attacks.
Mhm.
How, in fact, how did that feel for you being a director of the FAA, and how did it affect your job?
Well, it was an unbelievable day. It was an unbelievable next several months. I can tell you exactly what I was doing. I was in a board meeting with all my management team, and my secretary came in and she said, a plane is flown into the Pentagon. And my first reaction was, how could they have gotten so far off course?
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, we'd already had the Murrah building bombed,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't think that. We're thinking aviation now.
Yeah.
We're thinking in D.C. All I could think of is, wow, this is, how'd they mess up? And she barely left the room, and I'm telling everybody what's going on, and we're kind of like, can you believe that? And she was back in, and she said, and that's when everything started happening.
Mm-hmm. All at once. Bunch of dominoes.
Yeah. Where I sat, because of the Aeronautical Center's mission and the size of it, it was, number one, there's a huge amount of people there that you need to decide how you get them out of there. But then the risk was the logistics center has all the assets,
Mm-hmm.
so it'd be a prime target. And there were other key functions at the Aeronautical Center that were along with across FAA.
Mm-hmm.
But we got everybody home, and then the name of the game was there was a certain corps within FAA that did everything we could to, if you remember, we had to ground everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the myriad of things to get ready to start bringing aviation back up.
Yeah.
Everybody did, it was like an all hands on deck,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, and that esprit de corps. And I always said, FAA, give them a crisis and they rise above it more
Mm-hmm.
than any other organization you've ever seen.
Which is important. I mean, with
Absolutely.
aircraft,
You don't
any
want
aircraft.
it to be the only way,
Yeah.
but it was just like during the strike. People did what they had to do to maintain the mission and to continue.
Mm-hmm.
9/11 was just like that, and then some. But there were so many ramifications after 9/11. And then the Aeronautical Center was called upon to support all kinds of different programs as they got ready to stand them up. But we had new security programs, we had new issues. Because of the size and the expertise at the center, we were called upon. And I would not have wanted to be any other place, just because of the group of people that I could say, we're being asked to do this. And it's like, okay, we got it.
We'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
And as we can see now, the Macaroni Center is still standing.
Absolutely.
The FAA,
still flourishing.
The FAA is growing, expanding their FARs and everything else is that.
Right.
The last question I have for you is, as students trying to get into aviation, what's one word of advice you would give any student in general going forward?
An excellent listener.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people are focusing on what they want to tell people, and you have to listen before you can react. I remember the question I was asked when I was interviewing to become the director of the Aeronautical Center, and the deputy director at the time and director said, what is the most important skill? And I said, listening. And to begin with, they kind of looked at me, and I said, because before you can react, you need to listen. And you assess what's going on. Then you can be in the position of executive. Then you can direct, you can lead, but you could have someone telling you, again, the place is on fire. And if you're too busy saying full speed ahead and I've got the answer, you'll never know that.
And there's a complete difference between listening and hearing.
Yes. And so I would say, as students, you're going to have so many opportunities to learn and be a sponge. That's the other thing I would say. As I mentioned, the puzzle pieces with FAA, I was fascinated by how many different pieces all connected. And from then on, that was very important to me as I developed people and I coached people, is do you understand what the other parts of FAA do? And do you understand how they affect you? With you all, I would say, do you understand what the different parts of aviation do? And no matter where you end up, do you understand what they do? Because an air traffic controller, if they never truly understand what's happening with the pilots or airport executives or flight inspection, they only have one narrow piece.
And they can't effectively do their job.
Right.
They might be able to do what they're doing.
They think they know, but they don't know.
Yeah, they can't do anything that supports anybody else.
Or they just don't have the vision of, if you're a pilot, and I've heard this said, they wish they knew more about air traffic, because you get up there, it's not just one way.
No, it's not.
There's a lot going on around.
Yeah. I started flying last summer, and there's a lot going on some days with all the privates and everybody up in the pattern, so I get it. Awesome. And I believe that's all the time we have for today.
All right.
Thank you for coming out.
Thanks.
Appreciate you, Commissioner.
Thank you, guys.